Building the Future, Green Building in the New Millennium, brought to you by Sustainable Homes of the Future. Our natural world is in crisis. We need solutions now. Join the conversation today. Welcome back to Season 2 of Building the Future, Green Building in the New Millennium, the podcast where we explore sustainable design and its cost-effective applications in the built environment, the human environment, and beyond. I'm joined today by my co-host, Ginger Matthews. Welcome, Ginger.
Thank you so much, Ian. Glad to be here. Big welcome to all of our listeners. So happy to be here. And our launch is for Season 2 is this episode. So we're going to be diving a bit further into some of the concepts we explored in our first season. So glad you could all be here.
And for anyone watching us on YouTube, though these are just virtual Zoom backgrounds, we are both coming to you today from Santa Monica, California, which is the background and just so happens to be one of the greenest cities in the country. I actually interviewed the design manager, Amber Rashane, for our very first episode, our interview of the season. And you can listen to how they've been able to incorporate a whole host of next level sustainability strategies into the design of City Hall East. It's a really cool project. So what's up on tap for us today, Ginger?
Well, today's first Season 2 deep dive is focused on mass timber, one of our favorite subjects. So we talked about this idea earlier in some of our episodes on Season 1, but don't worry, if you've never heard about it before, it's actually not too different from traditional timber frame or post and beam construction.
That's right. We're simply using new technology here to beef up the structural strength of wood so it can compete with concrete and steel as a viable method for mostly urban infill projects. It's great for projects in cities that are really committed to lowering their environmental impact.
So important, Ian. And there are also opportunities with mass timber construction to speed up the project timeline and significantly lower costs during the build. Something even traditional builders can get on board with, I'm sure. So stick around to learn about the many benefits and of course, potential challenges of designing and building with this renewable, highly durable, and uniquely sustainable material. So today we're going to talk about carbon sequestration, heavy timber versus light timber construction, the environmental and social benefits of using timber instead of concrete and steel. So further, a new wave of carbon positive building. And of course, we'll also identify the cost savings. So another one of our favorite topics. So Ian, how long has mass timber construction been around?
That is a great question and a complicated answer. There are accounts of timber framed structures as far back as Neolithic Europe and Japan, but it actually became commonplace in England, France, and Germany during the 16th and 17th centuries. These half timbered buildings, as they're called, they used split logs as their structural members for the exterior and lots of different types of naturally occurring products, sticks, wattle, clay, straw, cob, grass to make up that infill on the exterior. But that's all on the outside. Inside, they were using these large timber members to span the width of the first story and then building additional stories on top. So not too different actually than modern podium construction.
Interesting, but all without concrete. I imagine you couldn't build very high with the technology available at that time though. We're just talking about 2- and 3-story homes here, right?
You would think so, but surprisingly, I found a few examples of 5-story construction, timber construction in England back in the 1600s. One called the Bessie Surtees House in Newcastle. Honestly, it looks like an ancient version of a mixed-use commercial building that you'd see today. It's got full glazing on the street side of the building. There's a commercial first story, and then everything else is residential above. I showed you that picture before we came on.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. So you're right, Ian. And if you look at more recent pictures, it looks like they installed modern windows without messing too much with the integrity of the buildings. So really beautiful and quite impressive that a timber building is still standing almost 500 years after it was built.
That's right. Yeah. Using various types of wood and wood construction methods to build buildings that can stand the test of time is not new. And that's what we're shooting for, right? Buildings that are durable and resilient.
Yes.
and just
Absolutely.
so happen to come with a lot of positive externalities like sequestering carbon and saving the earth. More about that later. Right now, let's go over the three ways to build with wood. Ginger, can you help our listeners understand the difference between timber frame and light wood frame construction?
Absolutely. There's timber frame or heavy timber construction, like you said, which uses large post and beam assemblies, normally 8x8s, as supports for the structure, as opposed to light frame construction, which really only came onto the scene about mid 20th century for single family construction. So they are what's used there is 2x4s, 2x6s, wall studs for structural support, and it's generally not recommended for anything above 2 or 3 stories. And it's highly flammable, I might add.
That's true. Yeah, one of the huge benefits of heavy timber over dimensional 2x4, 2x6 lumber is the mass that you get with the wood. It still burns in fire, obviously, but once the outside of that beam is charred, it actually protects the structural integrity of the wood itself, the interior. So that's why it's called mass timber. And it's defined by using multi-layered dimensional, normally 2x8 lumber to engineer these heavy timber beams and panels. And this then is used as a substitute for concrete and steel in taller structures. And it's actually been around in Germany and Austria since the early 90s, so almost 30 years.
Wow. And it's picking up steam, Ian, here in North America and around the world. So that's very exciting. Though one of the biggest barriers to using mass timber in the US is still, of course, outdated building codes and a lack of understanding around how mass timber buildings really could be safely built and the specific engineering requirements to do so. So the tallest proposed mass timber structure that we know of, 80 stories tall, is slated to be in Chicago. But there will need to be quite a bit of testing back and forth between engineers, architects, building safety officials before that comes to fruition, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. And clearly at this point, we've transitioned from talking about stick built and single family dwellings to now we're talking about larger commercial and multifamily structures here, which tend to be the best application of mass timber in these urban areas with lots of surrounding buildings and busy streets, higher land value. If I'm a developer, Ginger, why in the world would I want to build with an unproven method of construction, though? I mean, I'm thinking about investing millions of dollars in a valuable piece of land in the heart of a city. Where's my ROI?
Well, first, let's talk about the incredible environmental and social benefits of building with mass timber in lieu of concrete and steel. So we'll get to cost savings. Don't worry, very substantial.
Right. Okay. Back to environment. We talked about carbon in the atmosphere a lot in our first season of the podcast. We talked about GHGs, greenhouse gases, GWPs, global warming potential, embodied carbon, carbon sequestration. For more on those specific terms, check out our carbon episode in season 1. You'll find the link below. And this is the perfect time, actually, to say a big thank you to everybody that's out there listening. We appreciate everything that you're doing to teach yourself, to educate others, to further this sustainability conversation. And in order for us to keep doing this podcast, we need your support. So please go to our YouTube channel, Sustainable Homes of the Future. Hit that subscribe button. That would really help us out. Check us out. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram at SHF Build, and you can contribute to the cause on Patreon. We appreciate anything you can contribute, monetary or otherwise. What we're doing is building the future here, folks. So we need your help.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Ginger. Yes, thank you. We've established that carbon in the atmosphere is bad. What makes wood such a sustainable product? I mean, doesn't it take a tree 100 years to grow? And how exactly can mass timber buildings help turn things around when it comes to climate change? Help me out.
Well, you mentioned embodied carbon, which is the sum total of the carbon emissions produced through the entire life cycle of a material, including manufacturing and transportation. So, if you compare a natural product like wood that grows in the earth versus concrete and steel, products that require a great deal of energy, heat, fossil fuels to manufacture and extract, and then process into the finished product, the amount of carbon produced by logging and sawing wood is infinitely smaller. So once you cut down the tree, you can plant another one in its place.
Hey, that's cool. Wood is renewable, obviously. So
Yep.
it's much more sustainable in that respect. But we hear a lot about the clear cutting of forests, and one of the things I've been wrestling with is how do we come up with, assuming that mass timber scales here and becomes popular, how do we come up with enough sustainably sourced wood to build all these ply scrapers, as I've heard them referred to? It's not
I
really a
love
term
that.
of endearment, but you'll
No,
get that blowback. You'll have some names called when you try to upend the concrete and steel industry, I guarantee.
danger, danger. So, Ian, you mentioned FSC and SFI before, and both forestry programs are market-led initiatives that provide certification to ensure that the wood is sourced from forests that are managed in a more long-term, sustainable way. So it's not really any more expensive. It just takes awareness and intention, right?
Yes, yeah, an FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, and SFI, Sustainable Forestry Initiative, both awesome programs. And I also just learned that certain types of trees that have already been cut down or have fallen down, such as beetle kill pine, there's lots of it in the Northwest. It can't really be used for all the same applications that other wood can. It's perfect for the use in CLT and GLT. So good news. There are multiple sourcing options that won't eliminate our ongoing supply of sustainable wood, and that's good news.
So, Ian, would you let our audience know the difference between CLT and GLT?
So CLT, cross laminated timber, has layers that are glued together at right angles, alternating layers. So it ends up producing the greatest lateral strength. That ends up having a structural quality similar to that of concrete. So it's perfect for floor and roof assemblies, wall assemblies, these big applications without all the carbon emissions. Same with GLT, actually. Glue lam or glue laminated timber doesn't have that crisscross pattern, but otherwise same, and it performs more like a traditional sawn timber or steel beam.
So, using these two products, I could build an 80-story high rise made entirely of wood, I assume,
Theoretically, yes, yeah. As you
theoretically.
mentioned, right, as you mentioned, however, there are code requirements in place in most parts of the US that actually do prohibit anything taller than 85 feet. So we're not quite to 80 stories yet here. Before we get into the nitty gritty of codes and financials, I do want to talk about the benefits of carbon sequestration, both while the trees are growing and after they've been used to construct the building.
That's right, Ian. By building with mass timber, we can realize the environmental benefits of planting lots of trees, which literally sucks carbon from the air. And as long as we're sourcing the wood from sustainable forests, the building itself then becomes a carbon sink, continuing to absorb carbon from the atmosphere, just like a forest or a wetland or an ocean. So I think that's absolutely fascinating and wonderful news, and a great forward thinking solution for builders to consider.
Yeah, it's incredible. I don't think I could put it any better than Bruce King. He's the author of The New Carbon Architecture. And he wrote, "The built environment can switch from being a problem to being a solution." I'll put a link in the show notes if you're interested in learning more or reading the book. It's a really cool read. His goal is to show that carbon positive architecture, as he calls it, is possible and necessary if we are
Hmm.
planning to add 2 or 3 billion urban dwellers to our planet within the next 30 years. We'd be building an urban forest. Nothing better than that, right?
Fascinating, fascinating.
Yeah. Can we talk about time and money now, Ginger? Is it that time?
Okay, okay, we're getting to it. So, I mentioned earlier there were a lot of timeline and labor benefits in using mass timber in construction. So, Ian, can you break down how that translates to cost savings?
I'd love to. Yeah. One of the biggest misunderstandings about mass timber is that you have to have a specialized crew who's done it before, knows exactly what they're doing. And it's actually the opposite. Because of all the building components are prefabricated offsite and delivered flat packed to the site, there really is no specialty work required. You just need a crane operator to guide the puzzle pieces in place, no different than any other construction site. But it's honestly no more complex than building a huge IKEA cabinet. Everything's engineered to fit together perfectly, which helps speed up that process and actually brings down labor costs as well, which then translates to a more efficient and cost effective project.
Time equals money. Absolutely. So that initial design process and the offsite prefabrication also serves to eliminate waste and city traffic congestion due to less frequent deliveries of materials, as well as the elimination of literally tons of on-site waste that could be that is usually hauled off daily from the site. So yet another environmental benefit of mass timber.
And also one that ends up helping limit the cost of waste disposal and recycling. There are costs involved with those things too. So you'd be surprised how expensive those contracts can be for an urban infill project. The cost of permits to shut down streets can be less. And in this NIMBY era, the not in my backyard thing, right? Being able to tell the neighborhood when you're starting the process that it's going to be faster and therefore less intrusive to the community is a huge leg up. There's a mass timber building called T3 in Minneapolis, actually, and it's 7 stories high. It was designed by Michael Green Architecture, and as 7 stories, right? It was erected in 2.5 months. You know, we live here in Santa Monica. I've seen 2-story stick-built homes that take 2.5 years to build. So the 2.5 months is really fast for 7 stories.
Really fast. And to your point about labor costs, Ian, most current mass timber projects claim about 50% reduction of on-site labor. So any additional design, engineering, and materials costs are offset by reductions in the cost of time and labor.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's also worth mentioning that, as with any new product, the ability of mass timber production to scale in the coming years will definitely bring down those material costs. So the future of mass timber is looking pretty bright, I gotta say.
It really is. And I'm so excited about it. So there are certainly some engineering, seismic, fire safety issues that still need to be tested and incorporated into ICC and local building codes. But there's no question that the many present and future benefits of building with wood far outweigh the current challenges. We think that's a good bet.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Please go to our YouTube channel, Sustainable Homes of the Future, and hit that subscribe button. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and on Patreon at SHF Build. That's our name. We appreciate anything that you can contribute. And remember, we're building the future here, so we need your help. Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you, Ian. Big thanks to everyone listening to the podcast. So we hope we've enlightened you on the benefits of mass timber, ROI, cost savings, as well as the environmental and social benefits. So using timber is great instead of polluting building methods.
That's right. So make sure you subscribe, leave us comments as well. You know, we want this to be an open forum of ideas and mutual conversation. Please tell us what future topics you want to cover. If you're looking for more information about building with mass timber, please check out www.thinkwood.com. It's a great resource with case studies and really cool pictures and design inspiration. I just want to make one huge point before we go. So this shift to viability for tall wood structures and mass timber, the linchpin of the whole situation is that we use sustainable wood, and that's going to require a collective effort. We're going to need policy and market advocates and consumer education to make sure that the wood used in all buildings, not just mass timber, is sustainably harvested. Otherwise, that whole carbon sink idea goes right down the drain, pun intended. But I'm confident that if we all work together as an industry, we can move buildings forward and force concrete and steel to innovate and keep up sustainability wise. That's what it's going to take.
What a thought.
Thanks to everybody for tuning in to Building the Future, Green Building in the New Millennium, and we'll see you next time.